Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 24, and today I'm here with my friend Meg McElwee talking about creativity. Meg is an aspiring gentle parent of 3, former Montessori teacher, homeschooler, work-at-home fiber artist, and lover of beauty and creativity in all its forms. For the past 12 years, she has run her indie sewing pattern company, Sew Liberated, from her home, almost always surrounded by her beloved little ones. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. In our latest episode on wardrobes, I announced that I was giving away a minimalist wardrobe class, which is a $75 value, to one lucky winner who emailed me a screenshot of their podcast review. I am so excited to announce that the winner is Maria Karolova, who wrote, "Dearest Rachel, thank you for the amazing work you do. I find so much value in your podcast. The quality is amazing, the guests are extremely interesting to listen to, and your personality as a host is super warm and comforting. Maria, thank you so much for posting that kind review, and the Minimalist Wardrobe class is officially in your inbox, which will show you how to clear your closet clutter, build the wardrobe of your dreams, and get dressed each morning with ease. Congratulations, Maria." To everyone who posted reviews, I want to extend my sincere gratitude as those reviews are so helpful for a podcast. Thank you. And I'll be running another giveaway soon that involves the Sage homeschooling book and the bucket system class, so stay tuned for that. And now our adventure of the week. We attended a Christmas regale at our local Pioneer Fort, and it was quite lovely. We ate gingerbread loaf baked in the fort's period oven, roasted coffee and popcorn over the fire, made all kinds of period ornaments, woodworked an axe handle, danced along with fiddlers, played pioneer games, and sang around the Yule log. It was a wintry day so lovely that even the wild deer joined in the festivities. If you want to see photos and videos of this adventure, then head on over to Sage Parenting on Instagram and follow along. Today, my friend Meg is joining me to share a conversation on creativity. I have a few friends I really admire who sew their own clothes. Shout out to Christina and Holly and Christine. And they told me I would love her and needed to find her on Instagram. So I did, and I do. Then Meg got hooked into my bucket system class, and now we're Instagram BFFs. So after months of gentle nudging, I am so happy to share a conversation with the inspiring creative goddess that is Meg McElwee of Sew Liberated. Now tell us your story, Meg. Who are you? What are you passionate about? What about your relationships in life fulfill you? And what is your relationship with this topic of creativity?
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. I am so happy you cajoled me to be on your podcast. I am happy to be here. And I think I know a few of those friends you mentioned through Instagram too. If for those of you who aren't into the sewing scene and Instagram, it's a very friendly one.
It is. Everyone, because I've never actually sewed anything, but I'm like a fangirl. You know, like some people like watching football. I like watching people's creations and fiber arts. I'm a big fan, and everyone has just been so warm and embracing and lovely and encouraging to me. So I second that your community is amazing. Sorry, continue.
It is. So I am I call myself an aspiring gentle parent, because aren't we all? And I have 3 children. And they are 7, 9, and my little one is 5. she's not quite 5 yet, but I'm starting to see her as 5. She's starting to lose some of that, the toddler baby fat. And I'm like, she's my last. So I am first and foremost passionate about parenting my 3 kids. Initially, my path to sewing, to being an independent pattern designer, has been sort of circuitous. I initially got into this community because I was designing little aprons for my 3 to 6-year-old Montessori class. I started to blog about my experience as a Montessori teacher. I was teaching in rural northern Mexico in Spanish in the most idyllic little school that's all about, just creating a community where these little people feel like competent, able, loved members of their community. All backgrounds were represented there, and it was just such a beautiful place. So
That's amazing.
It is so amazing. And I guess I really had a lot of time when I lived in rural northern Mexico. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have television. We didn't have a phone line. And it wasn't until the second year I lived there that we finally got hooked up with internet. So I started in my free time, because there they have the siesta, right? So I would go to work in the morning, and I would be done. All the children would be done. The little children would be done with school by 12:30 or 1, and then even the elementary children, the older kids, would be done for that time. Like, they go home for a few hours. The older kids, the high schoolers, they go back for a little bit after that. But there was this slowness. It was this very small community, a little mountain community. I had a lot of time on my hands, so I started designing sewing patterns to be used in my classroom. And that was one of the things I brought down to Mexico with me, was a secondhand sewing machine. And I just had time to experiment. This was before kids. And it ended up being really fun for me. And I started designing women's clothes because I had a desire to have a certain piece, and there were no clothing stores in my little community. So I just had to get creative and start making my own clothes as well. And I started sharing my creations online, writing about my experiences, both, living in Mexico and teaching, and my forays into fiber arts and creativity. So that was sort of where I started off. And I guess, but what am I passionate about now? Of course, I'm passionate about fiber arts as well as parenting my kiddos, but I'm really passionate about finding beauty. And I'm not just talking about, I'm not passionate about beauty, makeup. I'm passionate about finding beauty in situations. I'm passionate about finding beauty in typically perceived, as not beautiful areas, homes, pieces of cloth. I like to try to find that beauty, both figuratively and non-figuratively. And yeah, so, I was getting back to that. There's beauty in so much, even in finding a good joke, or, laughing at a good joke, or,
yes,
seeing your child build a Lego creation, in, the beauty in accepting a mistake and talking about it and being able to move on. The beauty in loving where you're at this moment and its messiness, all of that. So that's what I'm particularly passionate about.
Wow, your story is amazing. And I had no idea. How did you end up in northern Mexico?
So my grandfather, my mother's father, was Mexican. He lived in the U.S. and he was very, dark, indigenous Mexican. And I grew up in California, so I was sort of on the outskirts, sort of part of this community. We would all get together for Easter specifically with my mom and all of her cousins, and so I had exposure to to holidays, to Mexican food, to Spanish. Although we didn't speak Spanish in my house. Spanish was my mom's first language because she was being raised by my grandfather's parents while he was fighting in Korea, and my grandmother had to work. So her first language was actually Spanish, but she forgot it as she got older, which I think was pretty typical back in the 1950s to kind of say, basically when my grandfather got back from Korea, and they were not wealthy at all, but through the GI Bill, he was able to be the first in his family to go to college. And they said, when he got back, it was like, we're going to speak English at home. The idea was to assimilate. The idea was to be American. And so from a young age, I mean, we're talking young, like maybe 7th, 8th grade, I would talk to my grandfather, and I realized that he felt regret for that, for this sort of distancing from his roots. And so I pursued Spanish with gusto in high school, and I ended up studying French and meeting my husband in my French class in college, and going to France in college. But I always had this passion for Spanish as well, and so I just wanted to reconnect. I didn't want to lose that I didn't want to lose my family's roots.
That's beautiful.
So I graduated, and I went to get my master's in Montessori education, and then we were just looking for jobs in Mexico. And we found this little one, back in the early days of the internet, there was a little job posting, and I contacted them and went down. And I mean, it was just the most beautiful place. And we still, now, we just, our hearts ache because we love that community so much. With people in it, there's something, and you talk about slow living and like what I see you as trying to do, Rachel, like the priorities that you establish for your family as being what that community in Mexico was. A group of people who are different but take care of each other no matter what. They just have the time. We were Americans. They would joke like that we had things, because I would be into a project, right? And I would be like, no, I can't go to the fogata. Fogata is like a bonfire. They'd sit around outside, and people would bring their guitars and just hang out, eat and barbecue together. And you just, it was super convivial. But sometimes in my Americanness, I'd be like, no, I'm really focused on what this project that I'm working on. And you go, Patrick. Patrick's my partner. You go, Patrick. I'm gonna stay and work on this. I see. I know that they would kind of like roll their eyes sometimes, but they were so right. You can strive all you want, but you don't need money, and you don't need status. You just need friends that you can spend time with, and it was just such a happy time in our lives, and our hearts ache in that sense because. And I don't know if you knew this, Rachel, but my middle son, Lachlan, was born with a pretty severe heart defect, and we were here, and we are in North Carolina, and Duke has a very good pediatric cardiology department, and so we ended up staying here because it's a wonderful place to be. Yeah. But my son had 3 open heart surgeries, and he's doing very well now. But we still, he needs to be seen by his specialists, and we need to monitor some things. And so we're here. We're in the States. We can't other than vacationing. And there's still a sense of risk in that. Like what what if he started showing some symptoms? What would we do if we were, let's see, it takes a 3-hour plane flight from Houston to get to Chihuahua, and that it's like a 6-hour bus ride from Chihuahua to, so it's like this calculated risk that we take when we visit Mexico, but we just know, like, we can't live there. Heart surgery happens in Mexico City, but it's a very new thing.
So you guys are trying to recreate some of the best parts of that life that you got to live there in your home and in your community where you are now.
We are.
I love that.
That's what it is.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. All right, now let's start talking about creativity. I want to start with ourselves. So one piece of feedback that I often receive from the Sage Homeschooling book is that readers are surprised and inspired to realize that one of the best things they can do for their children is to embrace creativity for themselves, follow their curiosity, learn, practice, create, be a whole person. Why is it important for mothers to embrace creativity for themselves?
Okay, so this is a tricky one. And it's tricky because even for me, like, it's hard to separate what do I do for myself and what do I do for my kids. Do you find that?
Mm-hmm. Because they're absolutely intertwined.
They really are. And when you're trying to be a connected parent, when that's like your supreme goal as a human, it's hard to separate. Like, gosh, do I sit down and goof around with these gouache paints for myself, or am I doing it because I enjoy sitting down and painting alongside my children? It's complicated. So for me, I'm not sure I make that separation on a day-to-day basis. It's just a way of life for me. And I think that there was a time in my life, and unsurprisingly, it was during the first 3 or 4 years of my son's life, where I was just there. It was just really surviving.
Yeah.
It was getting through medical trauma. It was just 6 months total over long period of time in the hospital. And I felt like my life was too full with my kids had so many needs that I had to set that aside for a while.
Yeah.
But when I look back at it now, I see that I still had certain practices that I maintained. And in those early years, so I'm in a different phase now, right? My kids go to the bathroom by themselves. They can fill up the glass with water and get their watercolor paints out if they want to do something by themselves. Even my youngest. So in thinking back to that time when I had a 22-month-old and a 1-month-old, and then when I had my third, I had a 4 and then a 2 and then a 2 and then a baby.
Yeah.
And it was intense, but I still allowed myself little periods of time where I would do my own thing. And that often meant that I had a baby on my back. It often meant that it was only for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. But I remember reading as a very young parent, Kim John Payne's Simplicity Parenting. Mm-hmm. So I had the Montessori training and all that, and gosh, aren't we all the perfect parents before we have kids? And
absolutely.
And like you can figure out what it's actually like in practice day to day.
Right.
And so I was researching. I was interested in what Waldorf looked like. I was interested in what Reggio Emilia looked like. So I was kind of dabbling in all these different educational philosophies and parenting, self-help books and that kind of stuff. And one of the things that stood out for me in that book was that it reminded me that children need the space to it's okay for them to feel bored, and they need the space, even from being a tiny one, to kind of figure out what they need, you know? So that might have meant having a baby on my back. It might have meant, setting out various art supplies and, letting them explore with that, being okay with mess, and just little by little helping them to become independent in their own play. Yeah. Whether it's with art supplies or, little wooden figures, or, later on Lego or whatever. I mean, I certainly, so my strength as a parent is not pretend play. Like, I do my absolute best, and I want to, have fun with my kids and laugh with my kids. Yeah. But my strength as a parent is, reading books to them, right. and creating together now. Yeah. So I started to develop little pockets of time where, my partner or my mom would come over, or, I could have this little bit of time to work on a project. And then later on it was, I work alongside my kids. I mean, now we share a studio. It's not like I have a room in the house where I close the door and I go off and I do my thing. Right. They see me sewing. They see me, getting out my materials. They know to try to keep the cats away when I'm cutting. All these, and we work in community, and it's slower for sure. Like, we stop, we chat. I have someone on my lap taking out pins. I have, someone who was wanting to do their own sewing project, and I help, find a fabric for that. And so, yeah, it's community creativity. I think from, as a parent.
Yeah, I call that living a family integrated life.
Yes.
And I love all of that. I think that we hear a lot from mainstream culture, this warning to mothers, don't lose yourself in motherhood. And I think part of how that can happen is if you never get out of that survival mode that you were describing, where your entire personhood and existence only becomes meeting the basic needs, serving the basic needs of someone else. And but
there's creativity in that too, right? Like, I always thought, well, that was a time when I was all into to just trying to make really cool meals, and like making yogurt from scratch, and learning how to bake bread from scratch. Those kind of slower times. When you had a little one on your back or your front, and you could it's like a turning inward. It's a season, but really what it is it's a season of planting seeds. I see. And so you're planting these seeds of creativity. Your kids are seeing you do little things here and there. They're seeing you get excited about projects, even if it's not something that's a typical, what you would consider an art project. But, they see that you're excited about trying to braid this bread or whatever. And you emerge from that time that's more inward focused, and your kids get a little more mature, and then you start to experience the summer, right? You get to experience the harvest of this slow planting season that you've had in early parenthood.
Yes. And I felt my most creative in that season of having my babies and being kind of in the deep end of it. I mean, that's where I wrote the first edition of all 4 of my books. Well, that's where I really felt because after the birth of a baby, that's when I've kind of described it like all of the puzzle pieces of who you are and your understanding of the world are on the table, like in pieces. And so you get to like play with them all and move them around and try and put them together in new ways. So I found it to be a period of tremendous creativity for me. And I think there's sort of this in the promotion of being present with your kids, which I do love, we've lost a little bit of the piece of the value of being with your kids without, like, every second that I'm with my kids, I'm not pouring energy and attention into them. Does that make sense? Like, there's value.
In fact, I often think about this because as a person, so you know that old fashioned dance where you had the cane like up horizontally and you would like do kicks and back and forth. I like kind of like jokingly like to consider myself looking like that if I'm like overly parenting. Yes. You know, like you're getting up in front of your kids, you're like doing this dance to try to entertain them, when in reality they just want to chat with you.
Yes, I call that the dancing monkey. Yeah,
you know, like it just doesn't. Yeah. And I felt the same way in homeschooling. So right now we're trying out some school for our younger two, and my oldest might want to experiment with school at some point here too. But currently I'm just homeschooling my eldest. But I always felt like that. Like I think we wrongly assume that as parents and as homeschooling parents that we need to present this animated, you know, just super lively lesson to them.
Yeah, and nonstop.
That overwhelmed the heck out of me. That's why I became a Montessori teacher, because I love education, but like I'm all about the beautiful environment and you know the sort of being quiet and observing the children and sort of like seeing, well, where are they? You know, what do they need? And really, so going along with this, I think what it is as parents is that what we need to look into is protecting our own and our children's flow. I don't know if you've heard this term before. Yeah. So the psychologist is this, I might botch his name, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Okay. Is a very long name.
It's brave of you to attempt it.
Thank you. So he studies this state of flow, and the idea is that you have the mental state you're in where your skills are perfectly matched with the challenge. Mm-hmm. So you're working on something that's not too easy and that's not too hard, but that it is a challenge and you are motivated and you are focused. It's that place where you forget to eat because you're so into something. You know, it's that that time when you're up in the middle of the night and you have a great idea for a book, right? And and like the ideas are just coming out and you just it doesn't matter that you can't go back to sleep. You're getting them out on voice memo. You know, it's that feeling of that excitement when you're moving on to the next step in a painting, or when you're attempting to make jeans for the first time. You know, like you have a certain set of skills and you are fully implementing those for the task at hand. And I don't know about you, but I love that place. I mean, I consider it a day well spent. If I have forgotten to eat lunch and, you know, I'm talking about my idea to my kids or whatever. And so there's, so that's what I feel like we have to kind of look for that in bits and pieces in early parenthood. As our kids get older, we can lengthen that time that we are in that state of flow more regularly. And I think that, I mean, what is this showing my kids? It's the role modeling in like them seeing you in a state of flow. I think I'm not sure if there's much better you can do for teaching what does good work ethic look like, in the real world to your kids. You're excited about something, you are focused, and that I just think that that's so valuable for my kids to see me focused and excited about my project or about my work. And I want to look for that same focus and that same interest in them.
Yes.
And I want to protect that in them. So like I was saying before, like when I walk into a room, I'm not going to like barge in, like doing my little cabaret dance with my cane, I'm going to like look around and notice that my daughter is like super focused on her art project. She's humming along. I know whenever she's like humming or singing, she's into it, like I'm going to notice which children, or if all of them, who knows, maybe all of them are just really at peace with what they're doing. And I'm going to watch, and I'm going to try to protect that experience for them.
Yeah, I like to call that holding space. That's how I think of it. Yeah.
Yes. So, it might mean taking the other kids out to read a book together on the front porch, or,
Mm-hmm.
it might look like a lot of things. It might be, like, let's put off dinner. We don't have to have dinner right now. Let's wait until he or she's done. So yeah, that's the primary way I feel like I cultivate my own creativity and theirs, is to kind of sanctify those instances of flow.
Yes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. I extended my creative passions out into the world as a business, and I am blessed to be in connection with a lot of gifted women entrepreneurs, including you. So what advice do you have for mamas out there who have dreams of generating income through their creative pursuits?
Well, and I think that you really have to ask yourself this question before you try to make a business out of an artistic passion. You have to ask yourself, do I feel as excited about the business side of this as a creative pursuit? Like, do I consider the business side and the marketing side to be just as exciting as the creative work? And if so, then totally go for it. But if not, then no, no, don't do it, like protect your own state of flow, protect your own passion for your art, and, or whatever it is that just lights you up. I think that in order for it to be a successful business, you just really have to also be excited about learning, am I going to learn photography? Let's learn about lighting, because I want to be able to portray these images, my product or whatever it is you're considering putting out there in the world,
Yeah.
And if not, then just keep it as your own special form of self-care. Does that make sense?
Yes, that absolutely makes sense. And I completely agree. Because a significant, a large part of what I spend my time and energy doing is the creative side, the writing, the creating. But like you said, a huge part of what I do is also like the business side, the marketing side. And you really, if that part is miserable for you, it's not going to work.
Yes. So at the very beginning of my exploration in this sort of sewing pattern world was one of the first things I did with a very little amount of money that I made was to purchase a good camera. And because it really didn't matter what I was making or the patterns that I was making, if I didn't really understand, or if I couldn't produce images that showed the product in good light and in an artful way, then then it just wouldn't have gained the traction that it has. So I guess I'll contribute a lot of my success as a work at home mom artist is as a good camera.
I so get that. Yeah. I mean, even for me too, a lot of the visibility and the reach that I've been able to get through my work has been sharing photos of my life with my kids.
Yes. And you can do that nowadays with a phone.
Yeah, I take all of my photos on my phone.
Back in 2005, you couldn't really.
No.
But yeah, I don't think they didn't even have smartphones back then.
No, it's so true. My first was born in 2005, and yeah, all the pictures were on this, like, it's a digital camera. Isn't that incredible? It was new technology that I didn't have to develop a role.
Super grainy.
Yes, super grainy.
Oh.
That is so true. Okay, let's talk about parenting. So, creativity is a significant ingredient in gentle parenting, natural homeschooling, and intentional lifestyle design. Everything we talk about here on this podcast requires an elevated level of creativity because you're not just keeping your head down and doing what everyone else is doing. So if you're here with us right now, you are exceptionally creative. And this is especially true in our parenting. When I'm doing coaching with families, I'm bringing an extra dose of creativity to the problems that people have been stuck in. How has creativity been essential on your parenting journey, Meg?
What you said is so true. If you're listening to this podcast, you are super creative. I feel that all people are creative. It's just accessing that and finding that passion. And you all are here today because you're passionate about being a good parent. And in my own journey, I can't tell you how many books I've read, how many blog posts I've read, how many things, systems I've tried out. And, I just constantly trying to adapt to the changing needs of my own 3 kids and trying to, I guess in a way, this feels like such a gringo term, but like optimize, family life.
Yes, that totally applies.
Well, in our family life optimizing, it's actually like it does take a lot of creativity to find ways to connect to your children through their changing needs.
Yeah. I mean, if your 3-year-old is upset and resistant when you try to brush their teeth at night, like even just trying to move through that from a place of connection and respect and empathy requires a tremendous amount of creativity. Like, perhaps it's the toothpaste. Let's try a different toothpaste. Perhaps it's the texture of bristles on this. Let's try a different toothbrush. Perhaps let's dial it way back to the baseline where they're comfortable and just use a warm washcloth for a week. Okay, now let's introduce one new, sensory piece. Like, moving through a process like that requires a tremendous amount of creativity, and we're doing those kinds of things all day and sometimes night as parents.
Yes, we are. And because creativity is born of the need to adapt, and it's can also be born out of desperation.
Well, yeah, like born out of a need.
And I mean, we're talking sometimes financial desperation. In my case, like that's kind of, we moved back up here to the States and my husband went into grad school and you just, I just needed Liberated to kind of bring in a few more bucks. And so I started, working a little harder on it. You just, if everything is going swimmingly, then you don't have a need to flex your creative muscle. And that's where I think there's so much beauty in the imperfect, is because you really just need it. You need to be in an imperfect place, a vulnerable place, an unsure place. And that's when you tap into your creative impulse.
Yes, discomfort leads to growth, and creativity is a huge piece to how it goes from discomfort to growth.
Yes, it sure is.
So let's talk about blocks. What blocks creativity for some of us?
Well, and I am going to speak from my own perspective here, but so I talked a little bit before about the cycle of creativity. So you have kind of a season of planting seeds, a season of harvest, and then you have a fallow season. You have to let the garden rest.
Yes.
Winter time, in order to then experience it again and start planting those seeds again. And the cycle starts over. So I think that a lot of people get freaked out by being in a season of creativity that they aren't aware of. And I think it's super essential that we respect the seasonality of it. So for me, that looks like, this last year, I had ideas coming out of my ears and my nostrils. I was like writing them out like crazy, and like right now I'm at the tail end of kind of doing the grunt work, the harvesting part, and there may come a point in time, which I also think is super essential that we respect it, that I pull back a little bit, and say, I'm going to, we're going to take 2 months off. We're going to, this is a time for quiet in that realm, and being okay with that. I've gone through this cycle several times before, so I'm comfortable with it. There was a time when I wasn't sewing very much at all. And for me, that being my primary artistic expression, the first time I went through it, it was a little disconcerting. Like have I lost my passion for it entirely? I think that that it's possible to have a cycle with one creative outlet, and put that garden to bed, and then in the spring something else will come, and you'll work on that and cultivate that. And but I think that we just really need to respect that quiet time, and also to respect that spring, that planting, that ideas sort of time, where you don't necessarily have
anything to show for it.
Anything to show for it. Yeah. And you might be in that period of time for quite a while. And for some of us, when we have really little kids, that might be your time. And you might be itching to get to the next stage where you're out there, you're weeding, you're taking the bugs off the plants, you're making it happen.
Yeah.
But I just love the garden analogy.
That is a beautiful analogy.
It's not necessarily about you. It's about the environment around you. The nourishment, your ability to have a good harvest is about the sun. It's about the nutrients in the soil, the compost from all the shit in your past life.
Yes.
That's just giving you what you need to have a field that then comes up more or less on its own.
Yes. And so I think the main block from people's creativity is fear, and that fear takes many forms. But I think one of the responses to that fear can be trying to force things. And in your garden analogy, no matter how much you try to yell at the crop or plant more seeds, it needs its time. And what it looks like nurturing the creativity, it might just be watering, or it might just be, whatever it is. It's not going to always be a harvest.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And the fears are many, like fears of, like you're talking about, also fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of judgment from others, fear around like the identity piece, like I'm not creative. Some people have that baggage.
Isn't that, and that's just so sad to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that I think about my husband who is, I think if, we were to slap definitions on him, I mean, right now he's a programmer. He used to be a humanities guy. But he, he's very analytical, and from a young age, who knows who told him this, he was just not pegged as an artist. Yeah. I was as a kid, like that was a label that I received early on. I felt it on my own, and my parents did so much to sort of value that in me while not making it my identity. They just provided me with time and opportunity. They took my chalk pastel drawings, and I remember getting one framed, and it was in hanging in the hallway. It was just like this message that your work is valued. Yes. And like that this clearly brings you joy, and we're going to support you in that.
That is beautiful. Yeah,
and Patrick, on the other hand, just early on was not pegged as an artist.
Yeah.
And so he, until we had kids and our kids were old enough to draw, he realized it had been 30 years since he'd tried to draw anything.
Yeah. I can so relate.
And art is not the only way creativity can manifest in your life, but it's just interesting how our early experiences and early labels can prevent that identity from sort of blossoming inside of us. Yes. And I love him for many reasons, but he sits down and he takes creative bug manga drawings with my eldest, like the drawing classes. He's like exploring the side of himself, and he's also, I mean, and you can imagine, his name is Patrick McElwee. You can imagine he is like as Irish. He started taking a hip hop class, dance.
This is awesome.
This semester, and I mean, he practices like a maniac. He works from home, so like on his lunch hour, what would be his lunch hour? He's like in here in the downstairs dancing to Ludacris, and my kids are watching him, and they have learned all the moves too.
I love that.
He was like I'm not sure if he ever saw his parents dance or any of his extended family, or no, like he was, in fact, his little sister was taking a dance class, and Patrick wanted to do it, but his dad, pulled him out.
Oh.
It's not, you really can't do the dance class. He's, oh yeah, okay. That's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other episode.
Different generations, I suppose. But now he has discovered this love of dance, and through pure grit and practice, like he's going to be one of the front guys at the performance in a week. So yeah, I think that, and of course he could have, there were a lot of voices that could come up for him.
Right.
And that, I'm not an artist. I'm way too Irish. Like I've never danced. I've never taken a dance class in my life.
Yeah.
But if you don't try it, you just don't know. You just should try it. And it can bring so much joy into your life.
Fear of failure, whenever I hear that voice, I always lean into it, because I found that that's where the fun is. If I fully
that's where the fun is. Yes.
When I can fully accept that, oh yeah, I'm probably totally going to fail at this, that's when I'm able to set down all of the armor. Like if I can just accept that, I can set down all of the armor and
release all the perfectionism,
release
right?
all of the perfectionism and the fear of judgment and all of that. And that's when I have the most fun. That's where the fun is.
Yes.
Yeah, I share a story in the Sage Homeschooling book where I talk about how in early elementary school, the class was given like a little 5-minute drawing test, and then they just sorted you and said, okay, you guys are the artists, and then you guys are not artistic. And I just like accepted that label and like lived my whole life. Like anytime something that was deemed creative crossed my path, I would reject it and say, oh no, I'm not creative. Like that's not for me. And then it wasn't until I started moving into this work and having my kids where I was like, oh wow, like that was not true. Like that's not me. That was somebody else's stuff. Like that's not my stuff. I am incredibly creative.
Yes.
And like remaking friends with that word and reintegrating it into my identity.
Expanding it too, right?
Yes.
Like I think that's where a lot of people again get blocked because they
like
have
creativity
a narrow
means
definition
drawing.
of creativity. Yeah.
Right. I totally agree. Okay, so children. So far we've been really talking about fostering creativity in ourselves, but I also want to talk about fostering creativity in our children. Beyond the role modeling piece, what else can we do to support our children's creativity?
Well, I learned this from my own mama. You provide them with materials, quality materials, and space and time. And that's, I think, where a lot of us get hung up if we're still kind of on that treadmill. Our time is limited. And let me tell you, I all it takes is an afternoon with nothing scheduled and a few salvaged pieces of wood from the construction site across the way.
Yes.
To have, or like big cardboard boxes.
I was just going to say cardboard boxes and tape. That's what my kids have been going to town with over the last few days.
I mean, give them a freaking glue gun.
Yes.
Well, it will change their little lives.
I could not agree more. And
so empowering. You might get a little burned, but it's not super painful, but it just gives them such creative agency in their constructing their, we had this epic boat making extravaganza in our house a few weekends ago where the kids just raided. So how I mentioned that we have a space that we share. And it's really what it is a dining room that is not functioning as a dining room because we have our table kind of just off of our kitchen. So this is sort of a formal dining room.
A formal dining space.
Yes. That is now a formal art studio. We call it the studio. And sometimes I'm in there sewing and I'm like trying to keep to my half of the table. And sometimes my kids just get on some idea and they build these boats and they fill up the bathtub and they try them out and they wait until it rains and then they go have boat races and the drainage out front. So I keep nice and accessible art supplies. So now again, my youngest is almost 5. And she's a very meticulous 5-year-old. My middle child is, I just love him. Like he's one of, what's the name of that Charlie Brown character who like goes around with a bunch of dust all over him all the time?
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know the name. Pigpen, yes.
So he's the kind of kid who loves to sensorially experience like art supplies, and only like fairly recently could decide not to add water to whatever it was I was working on. So I understand and appreciate when parents say to me, how do you have that set up how do you let your kids have free reign with the art supplies when, my kids would draw all over the walls or, would do it. So I know that there's a range of children, and you're going to have to find what works best for your kids in terms of accessibility. But
and also if you have all of those materials available from the beginning, you tend not to see those problems. So it tends to, just from all of the families that I've worked with, because I completely agree with you. And that's a huge part of what the Sage Homeschooling book is about. It's these things you're saying where you provide quality materials and then you hold the space and time and then you role model. Like that's basically the recipe. And if you do these things from the beginning, you really don't see things like, you don't see like the kids really don't burn themselves really. Like they don't get serious burns. They don't get serious cuts. Like if they always have tools, they're not chopping off fingers. Like if you have always restricted everything and then you suddenly open it up, then you absolutely can expect a period of transition where you're going to see them going crazy with all of the materials, sort of testing out the safety of this new arrangement to know if they can trust it. But if you've been doing it from the beginning, you really won't see that.
Yeah, it's kind of like in Montessori, how like they give even the littlest ones glass cups. Yeah. Because, that's just what you're used to. And they are capable of being very careful when needed. And I like to have a bit of, so we have a backyard that it's tiny. I mean, we live in urban Durham, but the backyard is a free, messy, creative space. It's like a kid. It's a space for my kids that's really it's their own. Yeah. The house we share, and they get that experience of, well, what does it look like to share a creative space with a mom who has work that she does here, like important work, and how can we all sort of, clean up after ourselves when we're done so that the next person can use the space. So I love having those two options available for creative play for them, because like inside it's a little more like just by necessity a restricted environment, and not restricted in like they can't do things, but just by the community, by being in community, being a smaller space and all that. But, and out back, they are more than welcome to, get out the shaving cream and we have a mud kitchen in the back. They can put up all sorts of cardboard cities and plywood things, and they can try to build a fort on the tree back there. They can draw with chalk wherever they want, even on the side of the house. Yes. So I like that dichotomy of having just this sort of space that is theirs that they can manipulate and sort of form to their creative vision, and the space that we share on the inside.
Yes, when we lived in San Diego, I would wake up in the morning, we would brush teeth, I'd walk out into the living room, and I'd open the sliding glass door, and then we'd go into the kitchen and make our morning smoothie. But the point being, like, that space is a part of, their environment, and they, again, even from the time my kid was crawling, like, he would just crawl out the door and go play outside too. Like, so if they have that from the beginning, then they learn, what they need to learn in terms of how to use the different spaces. And like we had a sound garden outside and they would be really loud out there. Or, your cup example is perfect, because if they have a plastic cup in the beginning, then they learn that they can slam it and throw it. And then if you suddenly switch to a glass cup, there's going to be a transition period where they have to get to know the new material and learn the new ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to add, too, that one really important piece that you can do to support your child's creativity, and this is sort of pulling from the Alfie Kohn episode of this podcast we had recently, is to remove the judgment and praise piece from your kids' creative endeavors. So instead of everything they're creating saying, like, I love it, or it's beautiful, or it's great, good job, good job, good job, good job. Instead of all the good jobs, just make statements of observation, like describe what you see or hear or feel.
Or like, one of my favorite is, oh my gosh, you really were focused on that. How did you feel making that?
Yes, and then ask open-ended questions. That's the second piece. So, like, make a statement of observation and then ask a question. Like, you used so many colors in this drawing. What inspired you to choose all those different colors together? And that is, if you can remove that judgment praise piece, you can really support your kids' creativity. Because if you train their mind to, it's kind of like a cookie as a reward. If you train them to create, to elicit that validation, then that becomes the purpose of the creative work. Instead of the creative work being for its own sake.
Right. Yeah, it's important. It's important for them to feel like they do it for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that creative work isn't just arts and crafts type of work. Like computer programming, like I know you said your partner does that. Like that can be creativity. That's creativity for a lot of people. So
or dance or experimenting in the kitchen and making watery muffins. Can't tell you how many watery muffins we've tried.
Yes. So expanding to your definition of creativity, like we talked about doing that for yourself, like what is creativity and how it can mean like even just the way you parent and the lifestyle choices you make. Same for kids. Like creativity isn't just arts and crafts. Like it's a whole lot of other.
For my eldest, it tends to be sort of entrepreneurial. He's like, I want to do a bake sale, and he has an idea of, something he either might want to purchase, or he last year he wanted to make money for the homeless shelter. He has this idea, and then he tries to figure out ways to bring about his idea.
Yes, entrepreneurial creativity. Yeah, and even things, like Minecraft. Like my kids will go through a phase where they're really into, technology is one of those things that's really triggering for a lot of people. They have a lot of fears around it, but like that can be a tool for creativity. My kids will go through a phase where they're really into something that feeds through technology, and they'll enjoy all kinds of creative work through that.
Digital art too. My eldest is really into digital art. And he really wants one of those Wacom tablets that has a stylus.
Yep.
So that's a whole nother arena that actually doesn't involve any mess whatsoever.
Yes. Good point. Okay, let's talk about minimalism and creativity. So some creatives struggle with too much stuff. They see creativity and minimalism as mutually exclusive, but we are not those people. How have you simultaneously embraced creativity and minimalism?
You just get your kids Wacom tablets.
Done. That's all you need. Problem solved.
Problem solved. Oh, well, let's be honest here, because it can be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
And I think that for us, the having the balance of the outside space that is theirs, and the inside space that is shared it has been helpful in understanding and having those conversations that go something like this. Sweetie, I see that there's this project out on the table that you started earlier this morning. I'm wondering if you're done, or if you need some, or if you're going to come back to it soon. Because if not, like, I'm needing to, have whatever project I have, I'm needing the space to kind of be a blank, clear, calm space so I can do my creative work, my pattern making, or whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
So them hearing and dialogue that, well, what my need is for a clear, calm space in order to feel that surge, to get into that flow. I really can't do. And this could just be who I am. and it sounds like maybe who you are too.
Yes.
Really appreciate that beauty in the in the white space.
Yes.
So I mean, I think about my eldest, and when he plays the violin, he really loves the notes. Like he really loves, like, he'll just like jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in one horse open sleigh. It's like he plows through that music. But what really makes it a compelling song is to have those rests, those white spaces. And you have to have that in order to have the next sound, the next or the next creative outburst or whatever it is. So my that's just been the discussion that I've had with them, that this is what my need is in order to enter into my creative flow.
Yes.
So we know that I clear the space. I, put on some music that I love. I might light a candle. I might, I just sort of sanctify that space in a way, make it sort of my creative altar. And it's at that point then that I can start my work.
And children will grant you the same considerations that you grant them. So when parents ask me, like, how do I get them, to grant me those things? Like, that happens from you granting them those things. So when they show you that a certain type of consideration or environment, helps them to be their best selves or to get into the flow in certain things. If you can respect that and honor that for them, that's how they learn to do it. That's how it then gets reflected back to you.
Yes. For example, my middle son is a very musical little fellow. He has different taste in music than I do. He really loves electronic music. And he will get into it, like he just loves, he first thing he asks whenever he walks in the door, "Hey Mom, can I, put on some music and listen to some music?" And we came to the conclusion that what he needed was a set of good headphones, and he needed total freedom to be able to control his own music.
Yeah.
And that's how he works best. He's really into origami right now. Like he'll come home, he'll put on his headphones or whatever, or sometimes not. Sometimes he'll just turn on his tablet and but that's what he likes.
Yeah.
Some people don't have that, and I know that because my husband is one of them. When we were, I guess we must have been married for 2 or 3 years or so. He was working the last 2 years. We're in Mexico. He was working remotely for his old boss in Washington, D.C. And so this was back in the early days of telecommuting. And we had this little house, this little adobe house. It was actually very cold because not all of it was well insulated. But he had a little desk that he worked on. And on his desk for 2 years was a 3-hole punch. And one day, towards the end of our time there, he said, "Oh, don't we have a 3-hole punch? I really, I got to put this together," or whatever he was doing for applying to grad school, who knows what. But I can't find the 3-hole punch. I was like, "Sweetie, it's like been 2 inches from your left hand these last 2 years."
Habituation.
So he doesn't have that same need to have a clean slate, and so that's why I know that it really will vary. Yeah. So it will vary for your listeners. It will vary for their children and their needs, and to just kind of realize that and to be okay with it and know that you can do your part to support them, like you were saying, and what their kind of baseline is for creativity. And in turn, you can communicate what your needs are and work it out as sort of that shared space mentality. Like, we're a family, we're gonna, it's not just about the kids' needs, it's also about the parents' needs. And how do we meet those two together? And that's where that happens. But I'm not sure if I've really touched on the minimalism, because let's talk about all of the paper, right? And what do we do with all of the paper? And for me, I tend to document things digitally, and we also have a space in our home. It's the staircase. We have a landing on our staircase, so 2 flights of stairs, and that is a gallery. It's an ever-changing gallery, and if a child feels really excited about something that they've done, I know that they'll feel that way because they'll ask to put it up in the gallery. And I just, I don't have frames. It's not like it's not Pinterest worthy at all, but it's a high traffic area in our home, and it's a place for them to display their work. And every year or so we'll go through and, we'll say, is this special to you? Do you want to keep this? Do you want me to take a picture of it? And they'll say yes or no, or they don't care anymore. And I might care, I might be like, oh, for your sister, I'm just going to take a picture of it. Right. And so I have a file folder for each kid, large, they're like large. I don't know what originally was in them, but they're large boxes, so they can accommodate the, 11 by 18 sheets of paper larger. So I have one of those for each kiddo. And, that's where I store their really precious, both to them or sometimes to me, pieces of work. And other than that, I know that if they don't ask to put it up, then it's not something that they care to keep.
Right.
I actually haven't listened to the Alfie Kohn episode yet, but I'm very familiar with his work. I read it a lot when I was in Montessori training, and kind of.
You're going to like it.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. That sometimes you create from a place of frustration or anger, and it's a way to release.
Right. It's about the process, not the product.
Yeah. And so I allow my kids to have that and to be okay. We try to be mindful in how we recycle our artwork. We ask, could we use this for origami, something, a painting or a drawing that they're no longer, they have no need for. So we have kind of this system whereby, some of it gets put into the recycling, some of it gets put back into the collage sort of, origami folding, other sort of space, and then some of it moves on. But so I just ask, I ask if they have stuff that they haven't been interested in a while. Are you ready to repurpose this, or put it in the recycling, or so it's a like everything, it's a collaborative process. And we try also to be aware of mindless making. It's something that I came into contact with a little bit through the sewing community, and where this sort of translation of the sort of the desire, the natural desire that we all have. Some of us are more or less capable of sort of moderating that, but if the wanting the next thing, and even in the sewing community that can happen, where they're just new pattern comes out. Well, I want that. I need to make that, and even if you already have something like that, or if you just simply don't need it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I more do for myself, and I talk out loud sometimes to my kids about, oh, look, this is someone came out with this great pattern. Isn't it lovely? oh, maybe one day I'll make that for someone, but for right now,
Yeah.
I just don't need it. And they know the size of my closet. They know that a one in, one out rule. And
Right.
and they just see me making those decisions to kind of intentionally slow down my creative output.
Right. So I'm hearing two things from you. Like, one, boundaries, which I agree with in terms of space. Like, you have that one wall on your stair landing where it's like your feature wall where you have your hall of fame, as it were, and you have, one box for each kid for their keepsake artwork. And we have something similar where each kid has a keepsake box, and in that box is like, that's their childhood box that they will bring into adulthood with them. So that's everything, like a baby outfit, drawings, like whatever, it has to fit in that box. So if they want to put 20 drawings in, they're gonna have to take some things out, and they have to negotiate that with themselves. And then the priorities piece, like you're talking about, there are a lot of, we have to say no to like a million things every day in order to say yes to the things that really matter to us. And so, role modeling that for our kids helps them to do that for themselves, that they can't do all the things all at once. I find rotation to be super helpful. So like, we don't have all the things at all times. There are some things that are out and that are accessible all the time, like white paper and markers. But we also rotate a lot.
That's the same for us. Yes, I have a little, and we'll put the links to this little art caddy in the show notes. But it's fantastic. It has multiple compartments, and they're like tilted at an angle. So in it we have pencils, we have scissors, there are 2 kinds of markers, and some chalk pastels. Yes. And that at all times is on the art table. They have access to white paper and construction paper. And other than that, they tend to sort of forget about everything else that is in a cabinet. Whereas, the older kids, they'll absolutely go, and if they have something in mind, they know where to get it, they can help themselves, that they know where those extra materials are. But that's where the Reggio Emilia piece comes in. It's the beautiful thing about that educational philosophy is, and it's very sort of arts, rooted in the arts, is the idea of the invitation.
Yes.
And so from the time my kids were little, and sometimes this was so much fun to do, and they were like, they went to bed, and then I would like set up this art invitation, and I might put a different, art medium out. It never was like showing the final product, and it was
just
like
the materials.
I might put out leaves or little pine cones that we found, or it was like this invitation to use these new to them, or things they hadn't seen in a little while, materials.
Or materials combined in a new way.
And combine them. Yeah. So I totally agree with you that it's great to have a basic setup that they have access to at all times, and that they're and bringing out occasionally bringing out those rotating supplies is really exciting, and for me too.
Yes, I completely agree. And gosh, I mean, I swear, I don't normally mention the Sage Homeschooling book so much, but I swear it's like you're talking about all of the things that I talk about all the time. Yeah, the power of the invitation. I say in that book that that's like the most active thing I do in terms of like homeschooling, quote unquote, is the invitation, like setting out invitations with rotated materials. So I might put like all of the stamps and some paper out on the table, or I might bring the nature tray over that I see has a lot of rocks in it, and then set out some paints that I know that that stay on the rocks really well, and some like marker pens or whatever, paint pens. So like leaving those invitations for them, and they are free to be inspired by them and jump in or not. I have zero attachment to the outcome, but it's just this rotating of materials and then rotating. So we keep most of the materials, like you said, sort of away. And then I pull those in and rotate them around. And then also rotating from outside of our home. So if the kids have been playing with something for a while and then they lose interest in it, and it lies dormant for a long time, I'll bring it out, and I think that they're done with it. I'll bring it out and I say, last chance play for this one, and it'll be like in rotation up in our great room until they stop playing with it, and then we put it in the Buy Nothing group or take it to Goodwill or give it to a friend who wants it.
That's great. Yeah.
And then vice versa. Like if there's something that I think would pique their interest, I will ask for it in the Buy Nothing group, or I will ask a friend to pass it along when they're done with theirs or whatever. So we're rotating within our home, but then we're also rotating with our larger community as well.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with my best friend here. Her kids are 9-year-old twins, and she's super creative parent. Like her kids are really into all sorts of creative pursuits, and several years back, her kids were into making like using tiny motors with gosh, how do I explain this? It's like some of them have propellers attached to them, but basically like tiny motors to animate their art and their things. And I just know that my middle son would be so into that now. And she's like, yeah, those are, I put those in my attic thinking that one day someone might want them. So anyway, like you try, and we did the same thing with the rock tumbler. I think in your recent episode talked about like this rock tumbler, just like passing things back and forth between friends, and then when everyone in your little friend community is done with them, putting them on a Buy Nothing group. I think all those are great ways to introduce novelty without increasing your
overall,
your clutter.
Yeah, the clutter, the overall quota of stuff in your home.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about clothing. I talked with Zoe Kim of Raising Simple in a recent episode all about wardrobes, and I mentioned that you were coming on to share your handmade wardrobe revolution wisdom. So lay it on us, Meg. How can we bring creativity into our wardrobes, both in acquiring and wearing pieces?
Okay, so I think that clothing serves two purposes. I think number one, it needs to help you feel comfortable in who you are and how your body looks and how your body moves. I've been having this discussion a lot with my almost 5-year-old who doesn't feel like a winter coat is appropriate to her style. She doesn't want to cover up the bling on the t-shirt, and I totally get that. So she goes off to wherever she's going with her coat in hand, but not on.
Right.
But I talk about how I personally like before I go out or when I'm getting dressed in the morning, I think, how do I want to feel? And the answer is always comfortable.
Right. Agreed.
So that's number one. You shouldn't have anything in your closet that does not feel comfortable to wear. Now, does that mean that you only wear yoga outfits? No. Me right now, I'm wearing wool leggings and a little dress and a cropped sweater, and I feel completely comfortable. My waist is not constricted. I'm sitting cross-legged. I feel warm enough. And the other thing, though, is that number two, the thing that you need to consider when getting dressed is you need to feel beautiful. And this doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. I believe that you can't feel beautiful if you don't feel comfortable first.
Right.
And sewing, for me, has to open up that possibility for you to create clothes that you feel your best in.
Yes.
And because you're making them by hand, the piece itself. Now, here's where I come in conflict with minimalism on paper. In practice, it's not like it's not as noticeable, but I know that there's a real focus on getting rid of on the minimalist path, and culling in our closet and letting go of items because they're just items. They're not people and they're not experiences. And philosophically, like, I believe that wholeheartedly. It's the people and the experiences that matter. But when it comes to clothing that you are making by hand or curating or, say, altering thrift store clothing that you're changing to work best for you, something that has a hole in it that you're taking the time to learn how to mend or to darn, so mending would happen on woven fabric, and darning would happen, say, if you got a moth hole in a wool sweater, you would either color match or not, and you could create a cool patch to same thing. Same goes for socks. For example, the Japanese have this technique called Boros stitching. And this, way back when, if you search the hashtag Boro, I think you'll come up with some good visual examples. But imagine sort of like this Haori sort of, big sleeves sort of jacket with geometric patches and stitches, sort of haphazard, but really beautiful in its entirety. So this technique did not come about because someone sat down all at once and decided, I have this vision for this garment and I'm going to execute it now, and
Right.
1 month later, there it is. No, it's because these garments have been mended and worn over generations. It's this art that evolves over time that is such an amazing part of fiber art.
That's beautiful.
And as you get deeper into the ecological impact of fast fashion, I've personally become more and more invested in not culling my wardrobe, but taking the pieces that I have and making them precious. So not that they're more precious than the people in my life, but I know that if we all did more of this, we would have less factories where women are and children even are not being paid a living wage,
Right.
where and you need less, but a garment that is touched by your hands and made by hand, that maybe the fabric source. And one of my favorite sweaters is a sweater that's made from a fairly local wool. And I know, like, when I smell it, I can smell that wool, and I know that the sheep are not that far away. And like the vest that I was knitting for my son when he went into the hospital at 3.5 to have his third surgery, which ended up being a really, really hard one. Like, I started that, and I know where I was. I remember those feelings. Like, I knitted that sorrow and that just all of that into that fabric, and it was all I could do to just finish the little shoulders. Like, I remember I was at home, and this was Patrick spent every night with him in the ICU at a hospital. He was never once alone. And so he co-slept in a hospital bed with our son. So I would have the other two with me, and I would be with them. And after I read them and sang to them to sleep, I would work just a little bit on this vest. And after we kind of got through that period, I put it aside. It just, like, it held so much emotion and so many memories for me that it was just too full.
Yeah.
And then I went on doing my healing work from that pretty arduous 4 years. And just prior to his 6th birthday, I picked it up. Keep in mind, I started this as a size 3 knit, right? So I just lengthened it and I finished that and I was ready. Like I look at him, he wears it. He wears it all the time. It's this like rainbow color concoction. And I get to see in there how grateful I am to be where I am today, to have this beautiful boy who is still alive and who loves bright colors. Like I think that clothing can really be a storyteller, and it's not for everyone, but I love to have clothing in my closet that makes me feel comfortable, beautiful, and that tells some sort of a story or holds some sort of a sweet or just poignant memory or time for me.
Right. Something more than I went to the Gap and bought it.
Yeah. Something more than that.
Wow, that is incredibly beautiful. Yeah, that is beautiful. And like you said in the beginning, I don't think that doesn't run contrary to minimalism, because you're not mindlessly keeping things, like from a place of just being unintentional, and you're not losing the things that matter in the noise and the chaos of things that don't matter. Like you're really investing your hands and your heart into the work of creating something, and then you are enjoying that something fully. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine.
My oldest really wants to learn how to sew, and I've never sewn anything in my life. And so I keep telling her, like, you and me, we're gonna find some project that we can attempt together that will be our.
Absolutely can. And you're near Seattle, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you should look for a local class to take together. That would be so fun.
Yeah, I'm literally doing that right now for the new year. I'm looking for some sort of sewing class that we could do together. For Christmas. Hopefully she won't listen to this episode, because that would be a Christmas present. Just kidding. I'm not doing that, in case you're listening, Sky.
We're not into experience gifts in this family at all.
Exactly. I'm going to Toys R Us, and you'll just be happy with what you get for a week, and then we'll throw it in the landfill. That's how we do things.
There you go.
Okay, a day in the life. Describe your favorite day this week and share with us why you loved it.
Well, they kind of muddle together. Did they do this for you too? I'm trying to pull out an individual day from start to finish. How about I'm gonna throw out some highlights from the week.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll take it.
So we've been trying to do some holiday things that feel stressless and joyful. And one of the funnest things we did this week was complete this gingerbread house challenge. And
I saw pictures.
Yeah, we did. My eldest two took this class on Outschooler, which is pretty fun. They do live video sort of conference classes. So you get to see the other kids and the instructor live, and it was a gingerbread engineering course. So they talked about, the principles of engineering and design, and they built their thing. They came up with a plan and they built it. And then they came back and talked about what were the issues that you ran into, because there's always issues, especially when you're constructing with, we were actually doing it with graham crackers. So all sorts of cool structural challenges came up and ways to fix those. And
that is so fun.
And that was just super fun. And Gosh, one of the things that I love about living where we do is that you just don't know what the weather's going to be like from one day to the next. So we had a great day where we were just playing out in the cul-de-sac with our neighbors. And that's the day that they found a bunch of plywood from a construction site and started to build things in our backyard. And they had all sorts of fun things going on there. And my husband went off to his hip hop class, and the kids and I had our little, I love reading to my kids. We all snuggled up and we read together. All of our holiday books are out now. So that's a big pull. And we cuddled up in the big bed, as they call it. And everyone on the nights that Dad does his hip hop, they have a mama sleepover. So everyone is in bed with me or in the trundle, the little mattress that we keep underneath our bed for visitors.
We do the same thing.
Yeah. So we were all just snuggled up. And that day it ended up getting pretty cold that night. And so we were all just, yeah,
cozy.
I love mama sleepovers.
Me too. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Oh, those are beautiful things. Thank you for sharing that. And now let's move into our deep dive. The show notes can be found at sageparenting.com/podcast24, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. What, Meg, are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic? And of course, I'm going to start with a link to your website and to your Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually have on my website, so liberated.com, you can get my free guide to making time for creativity. Talk about having a whole day for creativity and art that you set aside, that you put on the calendar, and you and your kids, you just have a bunch of projects that are out and optional. I love the book. If we're talking, I don't want to give this impression that it's this narrow view of creativity, but if you're into sort of exploring as an adult, exploring drawing again from kind of new, fresh eyes, if you were one of those people who was told, you're not an artist, I love the book Drawing with Children by Mona Brooks. Oh, okay. And it's equally as applicable to adults as it is to children, but you realize that drawing is really about noticing, and it becomes this sort of mindfulness practice where you're just noticing the shape of lines, and the direction of lines, and the direction of where the light is falling. So it becomes less, by going through this process that she has in this book, it becomes less of a like I need to have the talent within me, and more of a meditative process.
That sounds awesome.
And also I love I love The Artful Parent. She's one of my favorite art moms online.
Ooh, okay.
Jean Van Hull is her name, and she has several books out. Art Lab for Kids. They have one for little kids and one for older kids. Is fun for just having, again, like process-based, putting out those sort of invitations, the creative invitations that we were talking about. And yeah, there's another website I visit often. It's called Mary Cherry. She's another art mom, and The Art Bar is a great person I follow online.
Okay, I am going to look up and follow all of those people and get some fresh inspiration. And I want to recommend the book Big Magic, which has been one of my favorite books for better understanding my own creativity.
Yes, I second that. It's a great one.
Thank you so much for joining me, Meg. I have been looking forward to this conversation for so long, and you did not disappoint.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. It was a true pleasure.